Lieutenant Ben Sterling's military boots tapped sharply on the gleaming floor of the HFY space station as he finished his final security check. The curved corridor's expansive windows offered panoramic views. Earth's blue orb was visible to his left, contrasting with the crystalline formations of Elenium space shimmering on his right. These two worlds, separated by political disagreements and vastly different cultures, found themselves meeting here in the emptiness of space. "Last check complete, Commander," he reported into his comm device. "All security protocols are active." Commander Jensen's voice, crisp yet slightly distorted, crackled through the device. "The alien delegation is scheduled to arrive in 20 minutes. I need you personally overseeing the main reception area, understood?" Ben adjusted the collar of his formal uniform, the dark material a stark contrast against the sterile white of the station's interior. At 28 years of age, he was the youngest lieutenant ever assigned to a diplomatic security detail, a fact that earned him both admiration and heightened scrutiny. The reception area spread out before him, a testament to neutral zone design. Sweeping panels of transparent aluminum provided unobstructed views of the cosmos, while barely perceptible force fields hummed, ready to seal off any possible breach. The room had been deliberately designed to impress and to constantly remind everyone of the delicate balance they existed within, suspended between two powerful forces. "There early, Lieutenant," Officer Ramirez approached him with a worried look on her face. "An alien ship has just requested emergency docking procedures." Ben's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon. "Emergency? What kind?" he questioned. "They're not saying, but their credentials are in order." "All right," Ben replied, "monitor all airlocks. Have a full security team standing by, but keep them out of sight. We don't want to cause an incident." The docking bay's massive doors parted with a mechanical hiss. Ben moved to the front of the welcoming committee, his stance impeccably military but intentionally non-aggressive. The airlock cycled and everything was silent for a moment. Then, the delegation stepped into view, the figures passing through the doorway, and Ben's training nearly faltered. The alien delegation moved with an ethereal grace, their biosuits reflecting light in ways that seemed impossible according to the laws of physics. Each of the women wore suits of different colors, the material flowing over their forms like liquid metal. Princess Lyra led the group, her silver suit shimmering with each step. Her features were remarkable, appearing almost human, yet with an otherworldly quality that made her clearly alien. Her gaze locked with Ben's, and an almost palpable energy seemed to pass between them. "Welcome to HFY Station, Your Highness," Ben said, bowing formally. "I'm Lieutenant Sterling, head of security for these proceedings." Lyra's skin seemed to shimmer for a moment, a faint glow attracting his attention. "Lieutenant," her voice had a musical and precise accent, "your station's emergency protocols are exceptionally efficient." Ben maintained his professional attitude, even as he noticed the princess's advisors taking up positions around her. The one in red, Naira, according to the briefing, had a smirk that made him uneasy. "A small malfunction in our ship's navigation system," Lyra explained. "Nothing serious, but we felt it was prudent to dock early." "Oh, I'm sure that's all it was," Naira interjected, her red suit glinting like blood in the station's lights. "Nothing to do with your sudden interest in arriving early, after reviewing the Earth delegation's personnel files." Lyra's glow intensified slightly, though her expression remained neutral. "Naira, please," the advisor in green, Kyla, stepped forward, her movements graceful yet purposeful. "Perhaps we should discuss the schedule adjustments this early arrival necessitates." Her gaze studied Ben with open curiosity, unless the lieutenant objects. "My duty is to ensure your safety and comfort," Ben replied diplomatically, noting how the fourth advisor, Mara in blue, watched him with calculated interest. "The conference room is ready whenever you wish to proceed." "How accommodating," Mara spoke for the first time, her voice laced with challenge. "Tell me, Lieutenant, do you always adapt so smoothly to unexpected situations?" Before Ben could respond, a subtle vibration ran through the station's floor. The lights flickered once, twice. "That's not normal," he muttered, reaching for his comm device. "Control, status report." Only static answered him. Lyra's posture shifted, all pretense of diplomatic pleasantries vanishing. "Your station systems are quite advanced, Lieutenant." I trust this is a minor fluctuation. We should move to the conference room, Ben decided, gesturing toward the corridor. It has independent life support and communication systems. The group moved swiftly through the station's corridors, the alien women's suits catching the emergency lights. Ben noticed how they moved in perfect formation around their princess, even as his own security teams took up defensive positions. They arrived at the conference room just as another tremor shook the station. The doors sealed behind them with a heavy thunk. Life support is stable in here, Ben announced, checking the room systems, but we're locked out of main control. Someone has overridden a final, violent shake threw them all off balance. The lights went out completely before emergency power bathed the room in a dim red glow. When Ben tried the door, it remained sealed. Well, Naira drawled, brushing herself off as she rose to her feet, this is either the worst first impression in diplomatic history, or someone is trying very hard to keep us all in one place. The station's main systems are in lockdown, Kyla reported, her fingers dancing across a holographic display projected from her suit. Life support is failing in most sections. Mara moved to stand near Ben, her blue suit seeming to absorb the emergency lighting. Fascinating. Tell me, Lieutenant, does your security training cover hostage situations where you yourself are among the hostages? This isn't a hostage situation, yet, Ben replied, already accessing the room's emergency protocols. This is a security breach, and we're going to handle it. Lyra stepped closer, her silver suit gleaming. That strange glow beneath her skin had intensified, and Ben found it increasingly difficult to maintain his professional distance. Are you suggesting we work together, Lieutenant? With respect, Your Highness, we don't have much choice, Ben responded. We're locked in here together, and someone out there wants us to stay that way. Naira laughed, the sound sharp in the tense atmosphere. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Our perfectly composed princess, trapped in close quarters with the very handsome Earth officer she's been trying not to glow about since she saw his file. Naira. Kyla's reproach was immediate, but the damage was done. Lyra's glow pulsed once brilliantly before she brought it under control. Lieutenant Sterling, I suggest we focus on the situation at hand. My advisors and I have certain capabilities that might prove useful in this situation, and I have certain capabilities of my own, Ben responded, allowing himself a small smile, though I admit, none of them involve glowing. A moment of surprised silence followed, broken by Mara's thoughtful hum. Humor in a crisis, how very human of you, Lieutenant. The oxygen recyclers will last 48 hours, Kyla interrupted, her expression worried. After that, we're not staying here that long. Ben assured them, moving to the central console. But first, we need to figure out who trapped us here, and why they wanted all of us in this room, specifically. Perhaps they simply wished to create a situation where certain parties would be forced to acknowledge their immediate attraction to each other, Naira suggested innocently, earning a sharp look from Lyra. Or perhaps, Mara countered, they understood that putting the heads of security and diplomacy in one confined space would paralyze both our abilities to respond to whatever their true objective might be. Ben watched the interplay between the women, noting how each movement, each word, revealed more about their dynamic. The princess maintained her composure, but that fascinating glow beneath her skin betrayed her every time she looked his way. Her advisors clearly knew something he didn't about that reaction, and he filed that information away for later. Ladies, he said, his voice cutting through their tension, I suggest we table the speculation about attraction and politics for now. We have a station full of people depending on us to solve this, and limited time to do it. Agreed, Lyra said quickly, perhaps too quickly. What do you propose, Lieutenant? Ben pulled up the station schematics on the main display, trying to ignore how the princess had moved closer, her silver suit reflecting in the screen. First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Someone wanted us in this room. The question is, are we safer in here, or are we trapped? The lights flickered again, and the temperature dropped noticeably around them. The station systems continued their silent rebellion, leaving them isolated in their high-tech cage. But as Ben looked at each face in the dim emergency lighting, Lyra's controlled concern, Naira's challenging smirk, Kyla's worried focus, and Mara's calculating gaze, he realized that whoever had planned this had made one crucial mistake. They hadn't counted on their targets working together. Well, then, he said, straightening his uniform, let's find out what happens when Earth and alien ingenuity combine. Unless anyone objects to a little cross-cultural cooperation? Lyra's glow brightened just slightly, and this time she didn't try to hide it. I believe, Lieutenant, that cooperation might be exactly what someone was trying to prevent, or exactly what they wanted to force, Mara added cryptically, studying them both. The game was set, now they just had to figure out the rules and who was really playing. 3 hours into their confinement, the temperature in the conference room had dropped another 2 degrees. Ben watched as Kyla's fingers danced across her holographic display, her green suit's glow providing additional light in the dim room. The environmental controls are completely locked out, she reported, frustration evident in her voice. Someone has encrypted the override protocols. Someone who knows our systems intimately, Ben added, leaning over her shoulder to study the data. He noticed how she tensed slightly at his proximity, her breath catching. These aren't standard encryption patterns. Naira lounged against a nearby console, her red salute reflecting off the darkened screens. My, Lieutenant, you're quite knowledgeable for a simple security officer. There's nothing simple about the Lieutenant, Mara interjected from where she stood by the viewport, her blue suit almost ethereal in the starlight. His file suggests extensive training in cybersecurity and tactical operations. Ben raised an eyebrow. You've studied my file thoroughly. We study everything thoroughly, Lyra said, moving closer to the group. Her silver suit seemed to pulse with her heightened biological response to his presence, though some things prove more interesting than others. The princess's glow intensified as she passed him, and Ben couldn't help but track her movement. The reaction wasn't lost on her advisors. Your Highness, Naira teased, your illumination is showing again. Perhaps, Kyla suggested quickly, we should focus on conserving oxygen. The recyclers are working at reduced capacity. Ben nodded, grateful for the redirect. Agreed. We should split into teams to work on different aspects of our situation. Princess, if you'd work with me on the command protocols, I think not, Mara interrupted smoothly. Protocol dictates that the princess should not work alone with foreign military personnel during a crisis. Then work with me yourself, Ben challenged, meeting her calculating gaze, unless you're concerned about foreign military personnel as well. A slight smile curved Mara's lips. On the contrary, Lieutenant, I find foreign military personnel increasingly fascinating. The temperature might have dropped, but the heat in the room was undeniable. Ben maintained his professional demeanor, even as he felt the weight of very different, but equally intense gazes. The life support system isn't our only problem, he continued, moving to the central display. We need to establish communication with the outside. The lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness for several seconds, before the emergency systems kicked back in. In those moments of confusion, Ben felt a hand grasp his arm. When the light returned, he found himself steadying Princess Lyra, her glow now bright enough to cast shadows. My apologies, she said softly, though she didn't immediately step back. Our biological responses can be heightened during stress. No apology necessary, Your Highness. Ben's voice remained steady, professional, even as he noted how perfectly her hand fit against his arm. Though I'm curious about these biological responses. Are you now? Naira practically purred. Shall we give him a detailed explanation of alien compatibility markers, Your Highness? The glowing, the elevated heart rate, the increased tactile sensitivity. Naira. Lyra's tone carried warning, but her glow betrayed her embarrassment. We're all experiencing elevated responses, Kyla noted, her scientific tone belied by the flush in her cheeks. The confined space, the danger, the presence of a compatible, she caught herself, the presence of stress factors. Ben moved to the environmental controls, very aware of how each woman tracked his movement. Let's focus on getting these systems back online. Princess, your knowledge of encryption might be useful here, protocol or not. Bold of you to challenge our protocols, Lieutenant, Mara observed, moving to stand beside him. Her proximity was deliberate, testing. Though perhaps boldness is exactly what this situation requires. The recyclers hummed ominously, reminding them of their dwindling time. But as Ben began working on the systems, he couldn't help but notice how each woman found reasons to move within his orbit. Naira with her sharp comments and sharper looks, Kyla with her technical questions that brought her close enough to share breath, Mara with her philosophical provocations that felt like mental sparring, and in Lyra, the princess maintained her dignity, but her glow betrayed every glance, every moment their hands brushed while working on the console. The forced proximity was wearing down everyone's carefully maintained boundaries. "Your heart rate has increased, Lieutenant," Mara noted softly, close enough that only he could hear. "Are you finding our presence distracting?" "I'm finding this situation complex," he replied diplomatically. Naira laughed. "Oh, he's diplomatic too. No wonder you're all glowing." "We are not all," Kyla started to protest, then stopped as she realized her own skin had taken on a subtle luminescence. Ben focused on the console, trying to ignore the increasing tension in the room. But with every passing hour, every degree of temperature drop, every shared look and accidental touch, he was finding it harder to maintain his professional distance. They were running out of time, running out of oxygen, and running out of reasons to deny the chemistry building in their high-tech cage. 6 hours into their confinement, Lyra found herself unable to maintain her usual distance from the Earth lieutenant. Every time Ben moved near her, her skin's luminescence would betray her, casting a soft glow that reflected off her silver suit. "Your Highness," Ben said, his voice low as they worked together at the main console. "Your light, it's getting stronger." Lyra's fingers hesitated over the controls, a biological response we thought long dormant in our species. "It's inconvenient." Inconvenient, his shoulder brushed hers as he reached across to adjust a setting, and her glow pulsed noticeably. "It seems more than that," Naira called from across the room, ignoring Lyra's sharp look. "The princess is experiencing an ancient compatibility marker, one our people haven't displayed in generations. Something about human pheromones seems to trigger it." Ben's hand stilled on the console. "Human pheromones?" "Specifically, your species carries a unique biochemical signature," Kyla explained, her scientific curiosity overtaking her usual reserve. "It resonates with our biological systems in unexpected ways." "Most unexpected," Lyra murmured, trying to focus on the screen before her, despite being acutely aware of Ben's proximity. The slight scent of him, something earthy and distinctly human, made her head swim. "Princess," Ben said softly, turning to face her fully, "if my presence is causing you discomfort." "No," she said too quickly, then composed herself. "No, Lieutenant. The discomfort comes from fighting the reaction, not from experiencing it." Their eyes met, and Lyra felt her control slip further. Her glow brightened until she practically illuminated the space between them. "Fascinating," Mara observed from her position by the door. "The intensity suggests an unusually strong compatibility. Perhaps we should document this for scientific purposes." "Perhaps we should give them some privacy," Kyla suggested, but made no move to turn away. Ben maintained his professional demeanor, but Lyra noticed the slight increase in his breathing, the dilation of his pupils. "Princess, may I speak freely?" "Please do," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Your reaction, it's not entirely one-sided." His words were careful, measured. "There's something about you that affects me too, something I can't quite explain." The admission sent a wave of luminescence cascading across her skin. Around them, the other women watched with varying degrees of fascination and amusement. "Oh, just kiss him already," Naira muttered. "This tension is worse than the failing life support." "Naira!" Lyra snapped, but her glow betrayed her reaction to the suggestion. Ben's lips curved slightly. "Your advisor is rather direct." "She's impossible," Lyra agreed, but found herself smiling despite her best efforts. "Lieutenant Sterling, you should know that these reactions, they're more than just physical attraction. In our history, they indicated deep compatibility, mental, emotional, spiritual. Is that why you're fighting it so hard?" His voice had dropped lower, meant only for her ears. "I'm a princess, I have duties, responsibilities. I can't simply," she trailed off as his hand brushed hers on the console. "Can't simply follow your biology," he finished, "even if it's trying to tell you something important." The glow emanating from her skin now lit the entire console area, Our species haven't had this kind of connection in centuries. The implications are fascinating, Mara interjected smoothly, but perhaps we should focus on preventing our imminent oxygen deprivation before exploring interspecies romance. Ben straightened, professional mask sliding back into place, though Lyra noticed he didn't step away from her. Of course. The systems. Wait one moment, Lyra said, surprising herself and everyone else with deliberate movement. She placed her hand over his on the console. Lieutenant Ben Sterling, when we survive this, we should discuss these implications properly. His fingers intertwined with hers, and the touch sent sparks of light dancing across her skin. I look forward to that discussion, Your Highness. As do we all, Lyra drawled, though some of us would appreciate less discussion and more action. Lyra ignored her advisor, focusing instead on the way Ben's thumb traced small circles on her hand as they turned back to their work. Her glow settled into a steady, warm light that seemed to match the rhythm of their breathing, now unconsciously synchronized. The station system still needed fixing, their oxygen was still limited, and whoever trapped them was still out there, but for the first time in her life, Lyra felt something more powerful than her duty to her people, hope for a future she never knew she wanted. The 8th hour brought new challenges. The temperature had dropped enough that their breath misted in the air, though Lyra's persistent glow provided an unexpected source of warmth. The environmental controls are failing systematically, Ben announced, reviewing the data with Kyler. It's like someone's testing our responses, or testing how close we need to get for warmth, Lyra suggested with a smirk, watching as Lyra unconsciously drifted closer to Ben again. The princess's silver suit shimmered with each movement, her natural luminescence creating patterns across its surface. The cold affects our biological systems differently than humans, she explained, though she made no move to distance herself from Ben. We may need to conserve body heat. Is that what we're calling it now? Lyra murmured, earning a sharp look from Mara. Ben kept his voice professional, though his eyes lingered on Lyra's glowing form. What exactly happens to your people in cold conditions? Our bioluminescence intensifies, Kyler explained, her own skin beginning to emit a subtle green tinge. It's an evolutionary response meant to help us locate compatible partners during survival situations. Fascinating, Ben said, watching as Lyra's glow pulsed in response to his attention, and the compatibility markers you mentioned earlier become harder to ignore. Lyra finished, her voice slightly strained. Lieutenant, I feel I should warn you, as the temperature continues to drop, our control over certain responses may become compromised. Already happening, Lyra commented, stretching languidly. Have you noticed how we're all finding excuses to move closer to our charming Earth officer? She was right. Even Mara, usually the most reserved, had positioned herself nearer to Ben than strictly necessary for their work. The survival instinct is strong, Mara said smoothly, and the lieutenant's presence seems to generate an unusual amount of heat. Ben cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on. The lights flickered again, and this time when they stabilized, the temperature had dropped another 5 degrees. Lyra swayed slightly, her glow intensifying dramatically. Ben caught her elbow, steadying her. Princess? I'm fine, she managed, though her skin now illuminated the entire area around them, just adjusting. His hand remained on her arm, and neither made a move to break the contact. The other women watched with varying degrees of interest, as their princess's usual composure continued to crack. Your heartbeat has accelerated, Kyla observed clinically, though her own skin had taken on a distinct glow. Both of yours have, actually. A natural response to the cold, Lyra said quickly. Is it the cold, Your Highness? Ben asked softly, his thumb tracing small circles on her arm, or something else? The princess's glow flared brightly enough to cast shadows. Lieutenant, you're being very bold. Would you prefer I wasn't? Before she could answer, another system failure plunged them into darkness. When the emergency lights flickered back on, they found themselves standing much closer than before. Lyra's hands were braced against Ben's chest, his arm steadying her waist. Well, Lyra drawled into the charged silence, this is getting interesting. The temperature drop is affecting the gravitational stabilizers, Kyla reported, though her attention seemed divided between her readings and the scene before her. Among other things, Mara added dryly. Lyra knew she should step back, maintain the dignity of her position, but Ben's warmth seemed to call to something primitive in her biology, something that cared nothing for politics or protocol. "Lieutenant," she whispered, her glow creating a private bubble of light around them, "I'm finding it increasingly difficult to maintain appropriate distance." His hands tightened slightly at her waist. "Define inappropriate, Your Highness." "We're trapped in a failing space station," Nyra interrupted, "with dwindling oxygen and dropping temperatures. I think we left the appropriates behind several hours ago." "For once," Mara said, "I agree with Nyra. The situation calls for adaptation." Lyra looked up at Ben, her glow reflecting in his eyes. "What do Earth protocols say about this sort of situation, Lieutenant?" "They don't cover biological compatibility with alien princesses," he admitted, a slight smile playing at his lips. "We'll have to improvise." The temperature dropped another degree, but in their shared space, neither of them felt the cold. The 10th hour of their confinement brought a new kind of tension. With the primary system still down and rescue seemingly distant, the women of Elania decided to conduct their own investigation of their human companion. Nyra struck first, sauntering over to where Ben worked at the main console. She leaned close, her red suit catching the emergency lights as she bent over his shoulder. "Tell me, Lieutenant," she purred, "do all Earth officers maintain such rigid control?" Ben's fingers paused on the controls, but his voice remained steady. "Only the good ones." "And you're very good, aren't you?" She traced a finger along the back of his chair. "Your reputation precedes you. The youngest lieutenant in diplomatic security, known for your discipline. Should I be concerned about how much research you've done into my background?" He turned slightly, meeting her challenging gaze. "Oh, we've all done our research." Nyra leaned closer, her breath ghosting his ear. "Some of us were just more thorough than others." From across the room, Lyra's glow intensified noticeably, though she maintained her regal posture. Kyla chose that moment to approach, data pad in hand. "Lieutenant," she said, her voice soft and uncertain, "I'm having trouble understanding these human interface protocols. Would you mind explaining them?" Ben shifted his attention to her, professional mask firmly in place, despite Nyra's proximity. "Of course. What specifically confuses you?" "Everything," she admitted, moving closer until their shoulders touched. "Human technology is so fascinating, the way you integrate organic and mechanical systems." Her fingers brushed his as she pointed to the screen. "An expert in xenotechnology needs basic interface explanations?" Mara commented dryly from her position by the viewport. "How convenient." Kyla's cheeks flushed slightly, but she pressed on. "Perhaps you could show me how you would approach these systems? Your method seems unique." Ben demonstrated the interface protocols with patience, even as Nyra continued to hover, and Lyra's glow created dancing patterns across the walls. The princess had moved closer, ostensibly to monitor their progress. "Lieutenant," Lyra said suddenly, her voice carrying an edge of strain. "What do humans know of love?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ben turned to face her, fully aware of how her silver suit seemed to pulse with her increasing luminescence. "That's quite a philosophical question, Your Highness." "Is it?" She stepped closer, her glow intensifying. "Or is it merely biological, chemical reactions, pheromones, evolutionary imperatives?" "You tell me," he countered softly. "Your biology seems to have some strong opinions on the matter." Her glow flared brilliantly. "And what do you make of these opinions?" "I find them intriguing," he admitted, holding her gaze, almost as intriguing as the woman displaying them. "Oh, he's good," Nyra laughed, but there was a note of appreciation in her voice, diplomatic, even when being seduced by 4 alien women. "We are not," Kyla started to protest, then stopped as her own skin began to glow softly. "Aren't we?" Mara asked, finally joining their cluster around the console. "Let us be honest about our intentions here." Ben looked at each woman in turn. Nyra with her bold challenge, Kyla with her gentle curiosity, Mara with her calculating interest, and Lyra, the princess whose glow had become almost blinding. "Your intentions seem rather clear," he said carefully, "though I'm curious about the timing of this investigation." "We're trapped in a sealed room with failing life support," Naira pointed out, "when better to discover if the attractive Earth officer lives up to his fascinating reputation." "And what reputation is that?" he asked, though his eyes never left Lyra's. "Brave," Kyla offered. "Disciplined," Naira added with a smirk. "Intriguing," Mara concluded. "Life-altering," Lyra whispered, her glow pulsing with each word. "Your presence affects us in ways we thought lost to our species generations ago. Surely, you must feel something similar." Ben stood slowly, closing the distance between himself and the princess. "What I feel," he said quietly, "would probably break about 17 diplomatic protocols." The temperature in the room seemed to rise despite the failing environmental controls. Lyra's glow created a private aurora around them, while the other women watched with varying degrees of fascination and envy. "Perhaps," Mara suggested, her voice carrying a hint of amusement, "we should add the diplomatic incident to the lieutenant's growing list of accomplishments." The 12th hour brought crisis. The life support systems were failing faster than predicted, and the temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. "We have maybe 20 minutes of breathable air left," Kyla reported, her voice tight. After that, Ben stood at the main access panel, studying the circuits. "There's one way to override the lockdown. The manual release system requires someone to access the external controls," Mara finished, her eyes widening. "In near vacuum conditions." "No," Lyra said sharply, her glow flaring with alarm, "the risk is too high." Ben was already removing his uniform jacket. "We're out of options. Your emergency suit in the maintenance locker will give you 5 minutes at most." 5 minutes in conditions that could kill you instantly if the suit fails, Naira said, a usual mockery replaced by genuine concern. "That's not brave, that's suicidal." "Then I better not fail." He met each of their gazes in turn, lingering on Lyra's. "Princess, I need your encryption codes to access the override."